Who do you see in the Democratic Party as a possibility for 28? Because as we know, these dates come at us faster than we
Yeah.
sometimes
Oh,
anticipate.
it's deep. And look, I'm going to say it. I'm biased towards the governors, and there's a bunch of them out there doing the work. But look, there's people that I'm unabashed. I'm a big fan of Pete Buttigieg. I think he talks about it. I don't know what Vice President Harris is going to do, but I think she's got a lot to offer, folks.
Would you run for president?
Well, I had a friend tell me never turn down a job you haven't been offered. If I think I could offer something, or if there's a piece there that would do it, I would certainly consider that. I'm also, though, not arrogant enough to believe there's a lot of people that can do this. And by the time we get to 2028, what that skill set to do it looks like, we need to coalesce behind that person, whoever it is. And so I'll, if it would be that I have the skill set, I'll do it.
I'm dumbfounded. I just can't figure out. I can't figure out how they came apart so quickly. I mean, when you think back to Barack Obama, like I already said, they had it all, and now it's Buttigieg and Dome again. Joining me now, Jeffrey Tucker, founder and president of the Brownstone Institute. Jeffrey, look, I'm very biased. I'm a partisan. I'm not a journalist. I'm an extremely biased person. So I'm always going to look on in horror at the potential field of the other side. But they're just not popular. I mean, no matter what my thoughts are, love them or hate them, I mean, I guess maybe Shapiro or somebody, what happened to them after Barack Obama?
Well, I think the major thing is that the deep state was exposed. The administrative deep state was exposed, and the DNC was revealed as nothing other than a cosmetic sort of veneer for it. And that would explain everything that's happened essentially over the last 5 years, if not longer. And it's a little bit shocking to suddenly realize that one of the political parties in America is nothing other than a mouthpiece for unfireable bureaucrats, deep corporate interests, all the sort of permanent stakeholders of the entire ruling class of the American, if not global regime, are residing within the DNC. And that's a shocking thing. We like to think of our political parties as independent and loyal to their voters, but that apparently is not true with the DNC. And so something's going to have to happen to fix this party up, because the word is out. I mean, we're no longer confused about this. I just want to remind you that it was just not even 2 years ago, or maybe it was much sooner than that RFK decided that he would throw his hat into the ring and expected that maybe the Democrat grassroots would support him to replace Biden. I mean, that was the original idea of his campaign when he ran, because he was under the impression that many Democrats would favor his political priorities of giving government back to the people and cleaning up the public spaces and that sort of thing. That was his theory. And it was earnest. I mean, he thought, well, we'll have an open primary, and then I'll compete, as politics always are, and we'll get rid of this crazy crowd that's taken over the DNC. That it was an earnest effort on his part, but of course, he very quickly realized, within a few weeks of having declared, that there would be no open primary, that there was a cartel that ran the party, that he could never reach the base. The base would be disempowered. They would never have a chance to vote for him at all. The fix was in, from the very beginning. And that was a little bit heartbreaking to him, I would say, as a sort of sign of a long political family that had the most prominent family in the history of the Democratic Party in the United States, to suddenly find himself completely excluded, not even considered. And then they put in Biden. So it broke his heart in some ways, but he decided to go independent because that was the only option he had. That's what we're dealing with the DNC. He didn't know that even 2 years ago, but it's become very obvious. And what he discovered, the whole of the American public has discovered. So we'll see if there's a future for this party or not. What could happen, it strikes me, Jesse, is that in the same way that the Republican Party was sort of taken over by renegades and insurgents, through the Trump efforts, maybe something like that could happen to the Democrats too, but we're not seeing any signs of it yet.
No, we're certainly not. And I hate to pick on Tim Walz. I should take that back. I love to pick on Tim Walz, but I'm going to use him again because I want to ask you a question after we watch this. Here he was.
The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Is it their tyranny that doomed them to? Now, that's the thing that bothers me. I know that's the thing that bothers you. You and I have spoken many times. But for the normal American who actually decides elections, I fully acknowledge it's not me, it's not you, it's them. Is it the tyranny that turned them off? Because they really did. I mean, the mask slipped really quickly.
You know, it wasn't too many years ago when there were a lot of rebels and renegades and resistance types, people who didn't trust elites, who hated war, hated censorship. They were all part of the Democratic Party. But now all these people have migrated over. We really need to understand the structure of the new Republican Party. Mostly of all the leadership consists of former Democrats, people who had values of civil liberties and free speech and the rights of the people against the ruling class and so on. They were once part of the Democratic Party. Now they're all in the Republican Party. And a lot of the old Republican Party regulars are gone and disappearing, leaving the Democrats with just people who are just sort of strangely regime loyal, people who are glad to rent out their bodies and their mouths to others. On X, there's been all sorts of posts about something like 22 Democratic senators reading from the same script, the identical words, as a pre-response to Trump's address. And it's just incredible. You know, Elon was asking you who wrote this, and we don't know. In fact, he offered a Tesla, right, to find out who wrote these things. So that's what we're dealing with the Democrats, and they're going to have to get new leadership if they expect to compete. And I believe, I'm sure you do also. I would like to have a competitive democracy in this country, you know, where we have two earnest parties battling out over fundamental policy ideas. But that's not what's going on. We have one party that represents the managerial state class and the ruling class and the largest corporations and the deep state and all the embedded interests that drive us all nuts. And then another party that consists of a renegade group that are sick of the status quo, and they're looking for change, and they themselves are fighting an internal battle against the old guard. So that's the way America, from my point of view, that's where American politics is today. But I don't see a future for people like Tim Walz or, you know, God forbid, Kamala Harris or the rest of these types, Buttigieg, and they're the old guard, and something has to disrupt this party if they're going to have any kind of political viability in the future, I would think.
Jeffrey, I had somebody very smart say to me that they could see a real true outsider like this man type, like a Jamie Dimon type. It doesn't have to be that, but a Jamie Dimon type come in and really kind of, it's a fresh face, doesn't come in with any baggage, pull together this nutball coalition of Democrats. Could you see that?
You know, maybe, but, you know, you got to think back to 2015 when Trump did this to the Republican Party and the strange circumstances that were there. I mean, there were 8 or 10 Republicans that were vying for the nomination. He wiped them out one by one, thanks to the public debates, and it was a total humiliation for everybody, you know, just one by one, and he eventually captured the nomination. But even that wasn't enough. He became president, but not really, you know. I mean, Still, a lot of people were skeptical. They excluded him. They tricked him. They used lawfare. And even within the Republican Party, the people that were against Trump in 2016 and following a lot of them were just Republicans. So those were very unusual historical circumstances, and Trump is an unusual kind of person. Is somebody like that going to rise up within the Democratic Party? Maybe, but it would have to require a big open primary, big vigorous debates, and a lot of courage to take on the interests that are running this party, which, as I say, are the most powerful people in America at some level. It's just funny to me that you have, the very powerful corporate interests, the entirety of the civil service, all the labor unions, educational unions, and so on, all backing the Democrats. The World Economic Forum, George Soros, all the rest of it, and yet they're just politically not viable because they're, the marionettes that they've assigned to do the job of getting them elected are falling down on that job. So that's an awkward situation to be in.
No, it is. How much credit do you give the rise of social media? And as I've said many times, I realize all the evils people can credit social media with, and I acknowledge that as well. But there's good and bad to everything. The fact that so many Americans, and it's not just young people anymore. I mean, shoot, my in-laws, they're on social media. They don't watch the news anymore. They get their news from Twitter, from Facebook, from something like that. Did the death of the mainstream media really, really give maybe a mortal wound to the modern Democrat Party?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Of course, we're in the thick of this kind of revolution, and all of us are trying to understand it. A lot of times it's difficult to understand it. But the White House Correspondents Association that recently just got booted out of its cartelized position at the White House to make room for people like you and others from the independent media. It turns out they had been in control of the American media since 1914. And that's a really interesting long track record in which the sort of regime priorities merged fully with the mainstream media. That's been going on for 110 years, right? So we're now very newly introduced into a world of free information space and finding out things that we never knew before. I mean, I know you live like this. Every day I'm just astounded about what I didn't know and what I'm learning, It's rather amazing. And what the political implications of that, in particular, I would single out X here, because it's not through Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram that you're learning the truth about the world. We all know that it's through X. And what's that going to do politically to this country? So far, it's been very dramatic. There seems to be an emergent and very interesting new relationship that's going on between the elected government under Trump and the base, the people. We see it playing itself out, every day, where Trump and MAGA, Maha, and Doge are very sensitive to the vox populi, right? The voice of the people. And X is that voice of the people. It's just a fact that we've not had this operationally relevant in American politics probably for more than a century. So I think you could be right. This may be fundamentally disruptive. I feel like we're all trying to figure it out, but it does seem like a different time and a different situation we're all finding ourselves in, where the relationship between the government and the people may never be the same, thanks mostly to Elon's acquisition of X. But that's providing competition for the other platforms. So everything could change as a result, in part, of social media. I agree with you.
Maybe they will. Jeffrey, as always, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.